As we continue now moving into 2025, we're through the new year. And unfortunately, the situation on the ground in the Russia-Ukraine war continues to disintegrate, continues to fall apart. And Ukraine is moving closer and closer to really the point where they can no longer offer coherent resistance. And this is not just opinion. There's a lot of physical evidence on the ground. And when you look at this kind of in context, and we're going to take a bit of a wider view than we ordinarily do here, looking at the tactical situation and the diplomatic and political and even economic situation here. A lot of things are starting to come into focus here that shows that the end may be getting closer than even I may have thought. This particular story that Gary's showing you on the headline here right now, the 155 Mechanized Brigade, Ukraine's newest Leopard 2 brigade begins disintegrating before it even reaches the front. This is, if you haven't heard it, this is the story of a group that was trained primarily in France, and reportedly over 1,500 of the troops abandoned the field before they even made it to the battle lines, because they understand, they see what we see. They see probably more than we do. Not probably, they do. They understand more passionately why this is bad. And again, folks, this is Leopard 2s. These are some of the most modern Western tanks. They were trained in a NATO country, in one of their premier organizations of France, one of the top military components of NATO. And even they're falling apart before they even get to the front lines. Folks, listen, this is like the canary in the coal mine here. When you see one of what's supposed to have been an elite brigade that was trained as a cohort unit, outfitted with some of the best kit that we have, and it runs away, the majority of the people run away even before they get to the battle line, that should really tell you a lot. And unfortunately, that's not the only piece of evidence here. There was an article in yesterday Moon of Alabama. It was titled "Ukraine on the Verge of Military Defeat." That's where we got the title of this from. And I really like the framing that they used. And I want to try to really kind of advance a little bit on that. There was some maps that shows that there's an arc of major cities, or major towns rather, that has existed across the Eastern Front, and that's Chasiv Yar in the north, then Toretsk. Then Pokrovsk is there as number 4, Kurakhova, and then Vuhledar and Velika Novoselka. Those are the 6 major points in this area where Ukraine has been defending for a long time. This particular map, the first one you see there with the numbers on it, that was a snapshot on 1 July of this year. This next map here is the snapshot of 1 January. So 6 months later, that's how much territory has been chewed up by the Russian side. And look, it's not merely a matter of the territory, but it's the number of Ukrainian men that have been destroyed, the number of units that have been literally decimated. And you see also that these are important strategic and operational areas as well, because they control routes, they control supply routes, and they are also some of the areas of some of the best defenses that they've had, and it's starting to eat through some of the last ones that have existed since 2014. I'm going to show you on the map here. I want to zero in on some of these cities here. Oops, sorry, wrong button. Apologize for that. I'm going to show you some of the specific ones. We'll start in the north with the Toretsk area. That's this one here. And you've seen, we've been talking about this for months. This is another one of those that's been pretty, grinding and slow. But now then you see it's picking up. And now then Russia has moved into all but just the final outskirts of this city. Ukraine still has some folks in this area out here, but all the rest of this has been methodically moved through. And that's what you see. And you're going to see consistently on all 6 of these areas that he showed. 5 of them have either fallen or are about to fall, and Pokrovsk is next in the crosshairs. And what you see is a methodical move by the Russian side in here. So that's Chasiv Yar in the north. Then we move a little bit to the south of that, and we have Toretsk. This is another one that has basically been taken away already. So all of this area over the last couple of months has been taken by the Russian side, and now only a handful of these outlying streets are left. That Toretsk is now all but taken. Then, of course, the most recent one to fall, I think, just in the last 48 hours was Kurakhova, which is on the backside of the Pokrovsk area. In the area down here, we've talked about this several times. This whole area up until just 24 hours ago, the lines were way down here, but all of a sudden Russia had huge breakthrough, huge momentum, and the Ukraine side fell back into these areas here, and they're continuing to fall back further. Then, of course, there was the issue of one of the big ones that took a long time to take for the Russian side. They'd been trying to take this one for the better part of a year and a half, and that is Vuhledar. Now, you see back, you remember we were talking about this not too long ago. This had held out. This was like a fortress city, had held out for a year and a half of so many different Russian attempts. But once they took Vuhledar, you see that. I mean, gracious, look at all of this territory that Russia has continued to go up to. And that leads us to the next one, which is Velika Novoselka. And you see here that Russia has it all but surrounded. They have it in what's called operational encirclement already, where all of the roads have either been physically cut or they're under fire control on the Russian side. So you see there's literally no paved roads in or out. And this is some of the defensive positions the Ukraine side has in the back. But you see, they have to get forces in and out. They have to get medical supplies in and wounded out. They have to get the ammunition and everything. Anything that moves across these open fields is an absolute wide open view of the Russians, both from direct fire and from drones and artillery. So this is only a matter of time. I doubt that this is still with us in a week from now. And then all of that points to the last of these six cities here, which is Pokrovsk. And so in just the last 24 hours, we've seen that we start to see the outlines of what Russia is almost certainly going to do here. This is, as you see, this is a lot of the fortifications that have been built up around Pokrovsk, but it looks like Russia is not going to just plunge head in, because I think it was more than 3 weeks ago they took Shevchenko in this area down here and moved up to within a couple of miles of the or a couple of kilometers rather of the outer defenses of Pokrovsk, and then they have stopped there. And instead, they have been moving laterally here, and then now they're even starting to move north here. So what it looks like is that Russia is probably going to do the same thing that I just showed you on Velika Novoselka, where they're moving around it to cut it off from all of its supplies, and then they will either strangle it or then they'll start moving in when there's no more supplies that can come in. So you see, everywhere you want to look at the map, the Russians have continued to just take away everything the Ukraine side has. And I've pointed this out a couple of times, but it bears repeating here because it's so important. You see these remaining fortifications in these areas here. That's it. That's all there is. If these fall, and especially Pokrovsk is so important because it's the one thing that continues these lateral routes and allows the Ukraine side to move reinforcements around and to get food and ammunition back to the various ports of the front along these parts of the front here. If they lose Pokrovsk and all of these get cut off, now all of these become much more tenuous, and then Russian forces have the potential of advancing even further in these areas. And that's one of the tactical lessons that Russians have learned here from early in the formation of the war, where they were going head on into a lot of these, suffered lots of casualties, especially Vuhledar. Now then you see that they're using much more, ironically, tactics that they used during the Second World War. They've gone back to them because they were successful, which are some of the same tactics in the U.S. Army that I was trained under, which is you try to hold with assault formations in the front, and then you seek to isolate and then flank the unit to the possibility to find a weakened point and then come in from the rear to where it's a lot more lightly defended. Now the Russians starting to do that, and you see they're picking up momentum and speed all across the path here. This has not been lost on the Ukrainian command either. We showed you some scenes not too long ago. I think it was back in September, where General Syrskyi was being interviewed by CNN. Christiane Amanpour, and she was asking Syrskyi, look, you guys are not succeeding in Kursk. That's already starting to shrink. Even by then, it was already starting to go down. And there's a motivation problem, there's a morale problem. CNN was honestly reporting at that time saying, hey, we're talking to a lot of Ukraine folks and their morale is starting to fall. It's starting to go down. And Syrskyi just basically didn't answer the question. He just says, hey, you know what? Everything's fine. Really? I mean, it's challenging. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation. That's a phrase they use a lot. But morale is going up because of what happened in Kursk. And, we're changing the training now. We want to make sure that they get a minimum amount here. I've told you already, and Larry Johnson on our show a couple of days ago reinforced that, for any kind of a real probability of creating a new force, you need about 18 months to be able to get a unit trained up from scratch to have a plausible chance to really succeed in combat. But 6 to 9 months are absolute minimum, even if you want good trained replacements to go in there. They were at the time saying, well, they want to get at least a month. And of course, as we know, they didn't even get that. Well, now then, at this late hour, as we now literally approach the 3-year mark of the war, now we're into 2025, the Ukraine side has said, you know what? How about we relook the whole ground forces command? And maybe we need to make some significant changes here. This is just today. This is literally hours ago. Gary, if you can throw that up on the map or on the screen there. This is the Minister of Defense, Umarov here. And he's saying, we're going to conduct a review of ground forces command and and all the things that we're doing. And if you could roll up to some of that area there, Gary, one of the things that kind of stood out to both Gary and I, where it says that, listen, based on the findings, the Defense Ministry plans to introduce reforms in personnel policies, optimize management processes, and improve combat capabilities with new training approaches. And now then they're saying, we want to give them 2 months of training instead of just 1. That's never going to happen, folks. I mean, Gary showed you a few video clips in the recent days here, interviewing some of these Ukrainian fighters, and you see the shell shock look in their face, and you see how they're admitting that many of them are running away from the battlefields. It's not just a handful. It's not even just this 1,500. They ran away before even getting to the line. But these guys are admitting that we just want to live, and they're running away even before, which is one of the reasons you have all these desertions. For the Ukraine army to now announce that at their Minister of Defense level that they're going to conduct a review. Folks, that's something you do like way after the war is over. That's something you should do in normal peacetime when you say, we haven't done that good lately. We're going to institute some reforms, and it's going to take a decade or 2 to get there. And you have a methodical plan to get there. It gets resourced, people get trained, all those kind of things. That's possible in those cases. It is impossible to do this during wartime. It just can't be done. That's like, and this is no exaggeration, this is like Adolf Hitler in April or maybe February or January of 1945 saying, you know what, boys, let's have a review of our forces here. Let's get the Wehrmacht and let's start to review our policies and our training manuals and all that. The Soviet army was rolling in from the east, and the Allied armies were rolling in from the west. It's too late. You can't do it. You don't have the personnel to do it. You don't have the resources to do it. You don't even have the training facilities to do it. You can't do it. So all of these things are leading to the inescapable conclusion, which even the New York Times is now reporting. I think this was yesterday, that the situation on the front, and listen, when the New York Times is saying this, that's really something, because they've been trying to put a rosy view on things. But they wrote that the widespread assumption that Russia could not sustain this punishing pace of operations has proven misplaced, Ukrainian soldiers said. Key here, that's not opinion. That's for the guys who were doing the fighting. The view at the beginning was that, okay, well, I know Russia's been on the offensive since November of 2023. Well, they can't maintain this. They're going to run out of steam. They're going to culminate. So many experts said, yeah, they're going to culminate. Well, they didn't culminate. They have continued to maintain the pressure. The article continues on. It's important to understand that they have significant reserves. The Ukrainian Colonel, I can't even pronounce that last name, sorry about that, Pavlenko. With Russian forces holding the initiative on the battlefield, President Vladimir Putin has rejected any settlement short of a deal that would be tantamount to Ukraine surrender. We've shown you several times that statement from Putin on June 15th or June 14th of this year, of last year rather, to where he laid out it's all for the oblast. It's no non-nuclear, no NATO in Ukraine with whatever's left. Point blank. That's what it is. And now then, Putin is getting ready for negotiations with Trump, but he's saying, listen, this is just it. We're not going to negotiate any of these things because we don't have to. And you see, he sees on the ground, there's always been an uncomfortable correlation between what the Russian side says and what is actually happening on the ground, and a radical disconnect from what the Ukraine and NATO side and U.S. is saying and what that looks like on the ground. And that is playing out graphically on what we see right now. And I just want to show you a little bit here. This is what Putin said in terms of saying the same thing. You just see the New York Times admitting that the Russians are continuing the pace of operations and we can't stop it.
Our army is progressing. They're making advances, and the enemy cannot hold the positions. They withdrew, they organized some defenses, but they cannot hold those defenses, because tomorrow there will be the next advance. So they cannot stop our army.
So when I just showed you the map, and when you saw what the New York Times said, when you see the comments from some of these Ukrainian soldiers, et cetera, does what Putin said seem to match what you see on the ground? The answer is self-evident. It is. Well, now let's look at the other side of this coin, because on New Year's Eve, this is what President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said as his view of what's reality.
May 2025 be our year, the year of Ukraine. We know that peace will not be given to us as a gift, but we will do everything to stop Russia and end the war. This is what each of us wishes for. Behind all of us stands Mother Ukraine, and she deserves to live in peace. I wish this to all of us. And as the President of Ukraine, as well as a citizen, I will do everything to achieve it in the coming year, knowing that I will not be alone. I know that you stand shoulder to shoulder with me, millions of Ukrainians, strong, free, beautiful, independent. Happy New Year, dear people. Happy New Year, Ukraine.
If that was, say, late February of 2022, there might be some plausibility behind that. And in fact, Zelensky did say some of those things early in the war, long before things had law. At that time, there was legitimate possibility that maybe the tide could be turned, that Russia had made a number of really egregious strategic, operational, and tactical errors, which made them very, very vulnerable, which Ukraine took advantage of later in the year, especially in the autumn area, August, September, October. There's some tremendous, in fact, what turned out to be the biggest, if not only major tactical successes by Ukraine during the war. Had he made those comments then, there might be some justification to them. But folks, you see, I just, again, graphically, reality on the ground is take the emotion out of it, take the opinion out of it, just looking at the conduct of that war. Gary, if you could throw those first two maps up there again, I want to reinforce that. This first map here, that's July 1st of last year. And then this next map here, that is 2 days ago, or yesterday, sorry. That's yesterday. All that has just been chewed up since then. And of course, and aside from just the territory that's being chewed up there, it's also hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men who have either been killed or permanently wounded so that they can't even fight anymore. Now, in light of that, it seems a misplaced, in a bad way, for the president of Ukraine to claim that their people are winning, that 2025 is going to be their year and they're going to get a just peace, because there's no possibility for that. There's no evidence at all of that. And then that's going to put President Trump, who's coming in. So he still is less than 3 weeks out here. And as I wrote in this publication, 1945 Foreign Policy publication here in the United States, just a few days ago, that Trump's peace plan is already smashing into reality. So before he even takes office, the plan that has at least been pitched is the Kellogg plan, which is General Keith Kellogg, who's going to be Trump's emissary to Ukraine and Russia war. The idea that he floated earlier in 2024 has been categorically rejected by the Russian side. The Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, just said, no, there's no hope for this at all. We aren't going to do it. It's going to be President Putin's June 14th, 2024 lines, which is all of the 4 oblasts that they annexed in 2022. And so if that's the case, then you have to say, well, where are we going to be going with this? What is the possibility for Trump? Because here's the real danger for Trump, is that if he comes in and thinks he's going to get any version of the Kellogg plan through, and Russia doesn't give in on even the basic ones, and says, we're not giving in on even a little bit on those 4 oblasts. And as we've shown you many times, that includes a whole bunch of territory that Ukraine still possesses. And if here's the real problem for the Western and Ukraine side is if we continue to say, well, that's not the outcome we want, folks, that day's long past. We now have to acknowledge the reality of it. And it's going to put Trump in a very difficult position at the very beginning of his administration to come in and try to make some kind of a deal that can have any kind of a good face on it, but still bring the thing to an end, because Putin doesn't have to. Putin doesn't have to put a good face on anything. He's going to say, these are the lines. And if you don't want to do it, if you want to come and sweeten the deal with these other things, but they don't include those lines, he's just going to say no. There's no evidence and no reason, no rational reason why anyone on the Russian side would satisfy for anything less than those lines. And there's many, if you read Russian Telegram channels, that there's actually a thirst for a whole lot more. There is some consideration and some concern that the Trump administration team needs to be cognizant of, that by saying in these lines that Putin has, which would require Trump to negotiate away and give up large swaths of territory that Ukraine still has possession over, that they think he won't do that they believe that he can't make that negotiation. And so when he's willing to, then they'll use that as the pretext to just keep on rolling and take Odessa in the south on the Black Sea, completely cutting off what's left of Ukraine from any port, and then taking Kharkov in the north. And who knows where it could go from there? We'll see. But Russia is poised to continue going long after the start of this year. They are not like on their last ropes, even though the West has been saying that since, March 2022. Everything seems to be getting stronger and stronger, that allows a nation to conduct warfare in every category as they go forward. Russia is probably going to continue to build up its forces and its capabilities, and will continue to fight. And there's no reason to think that they're going to settle for something less, given the price that they've already paid when they're on the ascendancy. Now, one thing that Ukraine has just tried to do, they said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to do one last gasp, and we're going to do something to try and cause some real economic hardship for Russia. And so they have said, you know what, how about we stop doing what we've been doing and close off the gas pipelines from Russia to Europe. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this is kind of a strange situation that a lot of people didn't even realize happened. They figured it once the war, especially Europe and all of NATO put all these sanctions on Russia, and we're giving all these weapons and all this support, et cetera, that all the gas from Russia had been cut off, but it hadn't been. In fact, it was still, I think, about 20% of the pre-war stuff was still coming through, going through pipelines through Ukraine into parts of Western Europe. And here's the interesting thing. Ukraine was getting paid by Russia somewhere around $800 million per year. Now, that's a little odd when you're literally fighting a war every day, and yet one side is paying the other for services rendered, which is the oil passing through their country. Well, Zelensky now said, okay, you know what? Forget that. We're going to shut that off as of January 1st. So yesterday, the lines went cold, and no more gas was going through there. Now, the claim is that, yes, that hurts Ukraine. They're going to lose $800 million, but it's going to hurt Russia even more. Somewhere between $5 and $6 billion hit they're probably going to take in 2025. And by all accounts, everything that I can see online is that those numbers are probably accurate. It is going to cause Russia a lot of heartache and near-term pain that they're going to lose on that. But this is not unexpected for Russia. Remember, they lost 80% of their pre-war capacity before, so now they're losing the last 20% here will be painful, but it's also that they have been making arrangements for this, and they have foreseen this possibility and have a bypass. So you can see that, Gary, if you could put that one up there, that Russia has already prepared in 2025 to increase its oil and gas exports to China to offset some of this. There's what's called the I believe it's the Power of Siberia Pipeline 1, which is in an operation already, and they're going to increase by 8 billion cubic centimeters of natural gas from 2024 to 38 billion total in 2025. So that's already going to in place. So that's going to offset some of the loss that they had that was going through to Europe. And then they also have, according to the Congressional Research Service, they have a long-term plan for the Power of Siberia 2, another pipeline to go through, which they suspect could be in operation by 2030. So longer term, they're going to be able to do this, which means that Russia will find bypass routes and new customers for its gas long term. Now, what does this do? This has some immediate impacts. First of all, we'll look at one of the most near-term impacts is it's going to have on the country of Moldova and the Russian strip of that country called Transnistria. And the gas has now been cut off in Moldova. Moldova had prepared for this, and they had switched over to coal. But folks, they have enough coal to last somewhere around 50 days to be able to generate enough electricity to run their country, at which time they're going to run out and they got to figure out something else. Ukraine is claiming, don't worry about it, we'll send you electricity. But Russia is also destroying the Ukrainian capacity to generate or transmit any electricity. So it's not clear where that's going to go. Meanwhile, Moldova is apparently threatening that once the coal runs out, they're not going to send any electricity into Transnistria. And Transnistria, if you're not aware, is a Russian-controlled sliver of Moldova in between Ukraine and Moldova. And that's going to put a lot of Russian speakers in a lot of trouble, and it may raise the threat that Russia does something to try to alleviate that, whether that's going through Odessa and to try to relieve the Russians there or anything else. But it's creating a potential flashpoint. And I think it's not unreasonable to suggest that many on the Ukraine side may be trying to facilitate just that, to say, oh, look, see, here comes Russia. Now then they're expanding the war. They're going into another country. I told you they're going to go all the way into the NATO countries, blah, blah, blah. We'll see how that works out. But that's one of the flashpoints, something you need to be watching for in 2025, possibly just within months from now. Second of all, is that this is going to cause a lot of problems for Ukraine. So they're already very limited in the natural resources that they have, and of course in the financial resources that they have. They're already living basically on loans, and now then what they were generating, what Russia was paying them, they're now losing $800 million per year. So that's going to cause their economy to constrict even more. And unlike Russia, who has alternative routes and other customers, Ukraine has nothing. It's a pure loss. They can't bypass. They can't find new, because they just have it existing. And now then there's the question of, is Russia going to leave that pipeline alone, or are they going to shut it down? You know who else that hurts? Western Europe. So you already saw that Robert Fico, the leader of Slovakia, a week or so ago, went to meet with Putin in Moscow to see, hey, let's find some other way to get that oil, just because we're not going to just say no to it. And we're not going to suffer from that, because at least according to Fico, when he met with Zelensky and talked to him, he said, you weren't going to do anything that's going to help us, and it's going to harm us if we did what you asked for it, and we're not going to harm our country, so we're going to find a bypass with Russia. So apparently some way they're going to try and transport some natural gas to Slovakia itself. But for all the others who were receiving Russian oil that's much cheaper, now all of a sudden it's going to be much more expensive. So the fewer that they had now means that they're going to have to find additional sources of natural gas, and that's going to cost 3 to 4 times more. So Western Europe is already in difficult economic straits because of the loss of the earlier portions of the Russian gas. Now that it's going to be even more economic difficulty on Europe. And folks, listen, I'm just telling you, this is going to start to make a lot of Europeans unhappy. They're already unhappy. We've already seen a lot of shift in 2024 electorally in many throughout Europe, and then also some in specific European states where people are going more to the right. They're rejecting the existing forces and governing authorities, because they're saying, hey, y'all can't end this war. You're not, your side isn't winning it. You're not seeking negotiated settlement, and we're paying a price. And then now that price apparently is going to continue to go up. And again, Russia has the resources and they have the reserves that they can weather this. They have other places they can get their forces from. We don't, or we don't have any. Well, I mean, correct that. The Western Europe has other resources, the United States, where they can get liquefied natural gas, but at 3 to 4 times higher the cost, which means everything they produce will also be higher, which is a net economic loss for them. So I think that you're going to also see in the coming year more and more pressure from Western governments within NATO becoming more fractious, because they're going to want this thing over with. And I think that instead of maybe drawing this thing out, if Trump doesn't get a good deal, I think that you're going to privately have more of these leaders. We obviously know Fico and Orban from Hungary are overt and very boisterous about, yes, have a negotiated settlement at the earliest possible date. I think privately you're going to start seeing more people do this, because there really is no more rational path. Obviously, the war is over. It's lost. It's impossible to go back. And so what does anyone in Europe gain by dragging out the inevitable? It's all loss. It's all economic loss. It's all military loss. And I think that all the governments that support this blind support going forward to their own demise and their own harm within their country are going to find the governing capabilities get a lot more difficult as the people become unhappy about where that's going. That's kind of the real gist here that we have, is we've now entered 2025 and where this war is going. And as I won't repeat, what I've said too many times here, that we need a negotiated settlement to get this over with so that we can stop the pointless destruction of Ukraine, the pointless deaths of so many others. That's really what this is all about, folks. It's time to do time to take the hard decisions, do the right things it's going to take to get this off the table and move forward, and just stop ignoring reality. That's the bottom line. Thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Happy to see you in 2025. Also, just as a reminder, we're on podcast. If you're not able to watch all the videos, just go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, anywhere you get podcasts. Type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you will find us waiting there. Thank you very much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.